Benvenuto! Welcome to Cherry Hill Home Cooking. My name is Mark, and today we're going to make my grandmother's pasta sauce, also known as gravy. This is basically my grandmother's recipe. I have lightened it a little bit, and I use this in dishes like eggplant parmesan or chicken parmesan anytime I want the flavors of the dish to come through, other than the sauce. Also, I wanted a vegetarian sauce, and I use this sauce when I'm cooking for friends and family that are vegetarian. So, let's get cooking. Okay, the things you're going to need for today's recipe is ground peeled tomatoes. I use this product because that's what my grandmother used, so I always use it. One of the things you want to keep in mind when looking for canned tomatoes is you want to make sure that it's 100% tomatoes and not from concentrate. You're also going to need some tomato paste, dried oregano, good old salt and pepper, some fresh basil, chicken stock, some good olive oil, a couple onions, and 4 or 5 cloves of garlic. All right, let's get everything in the pot. Well, actually, before we get everything in the pot, I need to chop the onions and the garlic. So I'm just going to give these a rough chop. I'm going to blend my sauce because I like a smooth sauce. So I'm just going to rough chop the onions and the garlic. If you would rather a slightly chunkier sauce, I would suggest that you mince your onions and garlic up a little bit more fine. Okay, you've all seen many people crack a clove of garlic like this. Easiest way to hurry up and peel it. Again, if you're going to do this, make sure that you keep the sharp end of your knife turned towards your cutting board. Just give it a good smack. You'll see it breaks the skin and it then peels pretty easily. Well, should be pretty easily. There we go. All right, this one's got a little bit of brown on it, so I'm just gonna cut that away. All right, so like I said, same thing with the garlic. I'm just gonna rough chop it because I am going to puree the sauce anyway. If you break it up a little bit, and that's all there is to it. All right, now let's get everything in the pot. All right, I've got my pot on a medium heat burner, and you want to coat the bottom of the pan with olive oil. The recipe probably in total is going to have about 1/4 cup of olive oil in it. That's included in getting a good coating on the bottom of your pan. And then we add our onions. My goal with the onions is to get them just slightly browned. I just want them to caramelize a little bit to bring out the natural sweetness of the onions. And that's probably going to take anywhere between 3, 4, or 5 minutes. And you don't have to stand there and watch them that whole time, but give them a good stir around, get them all coated in your olive oil, and wait for the magic to happen. Ooh, you can really start to smell the onions. Just another minute or so. Okay, our onions are just about ready. You'll see they just have taken on a slight golden, little bit of caramelization is begun. Now, because I'm on a coil top electric range, I'm going to add my garlic, but I always take the pan off the heat to add my garlic because I don't want the garlic to burn at all and bring a bitterness to the sauce. So off the heat, I put the garlic in and I'll let it cook a little bit in with the onions. You're going to notice very quickly, you're going to start to smell the garlic in a minute or so. Even less than a minute. There you go. I can really get the smell of the garlic. So I'm going to put it back on my heat sauce. Now, before I put my tomatoes in, I'm going to add just a pinch of salt and pepper. This is going to be in addition to the salt and pepper we're going to put in the sauce. Just give it a little bit extra layer. Give it a stir. Add with the heat on medium. I'm gonna start to add my sauce. Oh, and you hear that wonderful sizzle as the tomatoes hit the onions and the oil and the garlic. It's already starting to smell like sauce. Although, we're still probably about 3 hours away from it really being tomato sauce. All right, then just to make sure I get all my tomatoes out of there, I pour a little bit of my stock in each can. don't have to do this, but it's one of my little idiosyncrasies that I do. So you're going to need about 2 cups of a good vegetable stock. If you don't have a favorite, as you look around for a good prepared vegetable stock, give it a taste. Remember, you don't want it to taste just like salt. This is a low salt version of vegetable stock, but you don't want it to taste like salt. You want it to taste like vegetables. Alrighty, so we've got that in. At this point, I'm going to put probably about the rest of what is the 1/4 cup of olive oil in. I'm going to add my dried oregano, salt and pepper, and I'm going to bring this up to temperature. Let it get warm before I add my tomato paste, and then I'm going to puree the sauce. I always do that before, I always puree it and then add the basils in, the fresh basil leaves. I don't know, I've tried blending it prior, and to me, for some reason, it changes the taste of the basil. All right, I'm going to get that warmed up. I'm going to clean up these cans, and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients. Okay, my sauce is heated up on medium. Took about 3-4 minutes. You'll see it's nicely bubbling. And now I'm going to add my 6 ounces of tomato paste. You don't necessarily have to heat it up. Again, excuse me. One of the things I always do with it is I do let it heat up just so that my tomato sauce will really start to incorporate into the sauce before I use the immersion blender. Oops. Or about the noise. All right, get every bit of that goodness out. And again, I'll let it just I'll stir it a little bit for a minute or so. Let the tomato paste merge into the sauce. There we go. Oh, one thing. I forgot to talk about the sugar when we were going over the ingredients. I usually put anywhere between 1 to 2 tablespoons of sugar. With any kind of natural product like, tomatoes or anything that's grown, canned, you're not always going to know exactly how the flavor is going to be. Maybe it might be a little bit more acid with some batches. Maybe the tomatoes aren't as sweet that growing season. Anyway, I usually add about a tablespoon at this point of sugar to it. Completely optional. You don't have to. I find that it does help cut the acid down a little bit and gives it a little bit of sweetness. Again, as in baking, sugar and salt go together and bring out the flavors of each product of the salt and sugar. All right, so now I'm going to take this off the heat and I'm going to bring it over to the counter, and I'm going to use the immersion blender to smooth it or puree it. If you don't have an immersion blender, you don't have to do this step. If you like your sauce a little bit chunkier, of course you're not going to do this step. I happen to like a smoother sauce. And if you don't have an immersion blender, I would suggest it be something that you add to your wish list for your kitchen. It is a really handy utensil. My brother and sister-in-law actually bought this particular one years ago for me, and it actually has a small chopper that goes with it where you can use it as a food processor too, and that comes in very handy too. So anyway, I'm gonna smooth the sauce. done. Okay, then I'm going to bring my sauce back to the heat source, and you'll see, nicely pureed that. It's not 100% smooth. It still does have a little bit of texture to it. Those ground pale tomatoes are still showing up in there, giving you a little bit of texture. All right, now at this point, I add my fresh basil leaves. Again, I don't know why, but to me it seems that if I add them before I do the immersion blender, the flavor is different. So again, you're going to need maybe 3, 4. Let's pick them off depending on how big they are. Might as well get them all in there. Smells delicious. All right, now the other reason I don't do it, I put the basil in after I do the immersion blender, is I do tend to take the basil out after the sauce is simmered for a couple hours. If I can find them, at least. Not that big of a deal. But the basil's done its job at that point. It's flavored the sauce. Now, the hard part comes. There's really no getting around this. Your sauce is going to need to simmer for at least 2 hours, even longer. The longer the better. You're going to put it on as low as you can. Oops, excuse me, I got to grab a cover. Cut my cover, sorry about that. As I said, put it down low, and you really need to let this simmer for a good 2.5, 3 hours. Why? I've got a question from the audience. I don't know why. That's the way my grandmother did it. She said, I can remember as I was watching her cook, and I couldn't wait for it to be done. She'd say, honey, the tomatoes need to cook. So that's the way we do it. All right, and I always put my wooden spoon up like that because I don't want to cover it tightly. This way, there's going to be a little bit of evaporation, and your flavors are going to get even more concentrated. So, this should be done in about 2.5, 3 hours. If I was going to be making meatballs, of course, I would still let this simmer. If I was making sauce and meatballs all at once, I'd still let this simmer for the good 2 hours. And then as you add your other meats and meatballs and so on in your Sunday gravy, you're going to let that cook through, so the sauce is even going to cook through longer. As I said in the beginning of the video, this is a little bit different than a Sunday gravy where, one, I haven't used any meat. Of course, the Sunday gravy would generally have probably some types of, spare ribs or pork ribs, maybe some beef ribs, the meatballs. Also, when I make Sunday gravy, I use a really good beef stock instead of chicken stock. And a lot of other ingredients that go into a Sunday gravy. But as I said, this gravy I use when I want a little bit lighter of flavor for other dishes, when I want the flavors of the other dishes to come through. And especially, this is a great vegetarian sauce. All right, I guess we'll see you in a couple hours when the sauce is cooked. Ciao. Okay, my sauce has been simmering for about 3.5 hours. Looks good to me. Remember, you want to taste it, adjust the seasoning. You might want a little bit more salt or maybe a little bit more oregano or something. Mine tastes perfect, so we're going to go with it. And let's see how it tastes.
You taste it with me?
Nope, you go ahead and eat. You taste it. I've been tasting it several times through the afternoon.
It's delicious.
See? A totally unbiased opinion. Remember, I don't know if I mentioned it when we first put the sauce on to simmer, but you want to keep an eye on it. Give it a stir every 10, 15 minutes or so. Make sure that it's not burning or anything like that. Well, I hope that you enjoy this gravy and that you'll try it. And we'll be using this in a future episode. Thanks for watching. Ciao.
Bye.